Stumps and Stories podcast with nishad by Vaidya.
We at Stumps and Stories love to bring you different perspectives of the game that we all love, the game called cricket, because essentially I believe that this game is about stories. It's about stories that inspire, it's about stories that make us laugh. It also is about stories that give us a lot of hope about the future. So, today we've got someone who has had a very interesting journey over a long time around the sport of cricket. And I've had the pleasure of traveling a couple of times with him on different cricket tours. And it has been an amazing, amazing perspective that, this man has to share, because he started off in the early 2000s as a cricket writer. But if you look at him today, then I would say that he is a jack of all trades, and he's also mastered a few. And it's because he's a sports anchor, he's a commentator, he has written books on the sport, but at the same time, he's also segued into acting. Not just that, for years, he's also had a different take on events, not just around cricket, but he's got these shows on the internet. Now, there are so many to actually tell you. It's a little difficult to keep track, because I just see Jamie Alter, as I'd like to introduce him right now. I've seen him across the board on social media, on YouTube, on different apps, and he's right there, and he allows the audience a different take on the event. So, Jamie, welcome. And as my audience can see in the background, there are superheroes, there's pictures of your family, there's the award from YouTube, of course, for reaching your milestones, and we've also got a couple of cricket balls. So that, in a way, I would say, sums up what you are.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nishad, first of all, for that very, very kind introduction. I wish I would get such nice introductions wherever I go. Yeah, look, it's great to be here. And yes, we were talking before we went, the recording started about the 2015 World Cup. So, and again, that is just, I'm very, very blessed. I think all of us, you included, who get a chance to cover this great game, we get paid to watch and talk on cricket. Is there a better job? So I'm very, very grateful for this journey. How I've got here, I'm sure we'll discuss, and you'll ask me good questions. And yeah, you're absolutely right. This frame I've set it's a conscious effort to try and encapsulate most of what I've done. So you see the films, you see the family. I've got some man of the match awards. The 2 times I've taken 5 wicket hauls, I've got those balls signed. One of them is a damn good story, I'm sure you'll ask me. And then superheroes, because I grew up with some favorites. These two are actually my 9-year-old son's favorite, and because he often spends time in here, I like to make him feel welcome. So that's for him. And yeah, that frame is in many ways, Nishad, me, as you know very well.
Jamie, actually, I'll tell you my first memory of you, and I don't know if you will remember this. And it was not when we met. In fact, I saw you on TV. It was during an IPL game where you were interviewed because you had just written a book. And, you and your father had come in for yes, this one. That's right. And the game was at DY Patil Stadium, which the book is about. And it was you and your father sitting and watching an IPL game. And you were interviewed. And, at the time, actually, I was just considering a career in this field. And I remember listening to every word that you said, because on the one hand was, it's very simple, because your dad, for viewers who may not know, Jamie's dad, the great Tom Alter, we all remember him. And, it would have been easy for someone like me to assume that since your dad is an actor, maybe you'll follow in the footsteps. You have, of course, years later. But I listened to every word because I thought, here's a guy who has really followed his love for the game. So can you tell me about how you got to that point where, it just started? We all start at the lowest level. How did it start for you?
Yeah, no, again, you mentioned my father, Mr. Tom Alter. It all starts there. You can imagine, I mean, I know, but for the benefit of your viewers as well, he was an actor, of course. That's what he's most known for. But way before becoming an actor, he was a sportsman. He went to a school, a boarding school in Missouri called Woodstock, where I've gone. And having gone through those halls, I know that seeing his name and his brother and his cousin's name across so many different sports trophies, as you can imagine, boarding school, Ye trophy, wo trophy, long jump, high jump, running, all that stuff. So it's very much, I was very aware from a young age about my father's love for sports. And anyone from those from those years who's still alive won't hesitate to ever tell me when I'm walking to the market in Missouri कि आपके father ने high jump में ये किया था, उन्होंने tennis में ये किया था. So this whole sporting awakening, I'm very, very blessed, Nishad. I had it at a very, very young age, but it was not so straightforward. You know, just because I heard stories about cricket and other sports, it wasn't like I naturally gravitated to one sport at a very young age. I tried almost every single sport, but I was a dud at most of them, right? But you know, having heard cricket stories, having been aware that my father, he covered the 87 World Cup for Sports Week, having heard those stories. In fact, I was I was 7 years old, 6 years old, sorry, when I went for my first test match. It was West Indies versus India at the Wankhede, the final time that Viv Richards ever came to India. At that young age, I didn't really know much about cricket. It was a hot day. I know it was December, but it was still hot for me. And my dad said, look, you're going to have a bad time. You're not going to understand anything, but I'm taking you there because there's a man called Sir Viv Richards and it's his last test tour. You won't get this, but someday down the line, you'll talk about this very proudly. And he was right. Here I am. So that was my first sort of awakening in cricket. Then, of course, you, me, and lakhs and crores of people, we all try to be cricketers. We don't get there. School level, college level, filana dimkana. Then you end up realizing, chalo, if we cannot do it, let's do the next best thing. I keep saying it. I'm here because I failed at most other academic things, you know. So I was very, very briefly after my college in the US, I was working there. I was homesick. I wanted to come back to India. I was actually spending a lot of time on Willow TV. I was following Cricinfo's ball by ball. Not just Nishad, not just India's games. You know, anything that flickered, I was obsessed with it. I would go home and so I got to a stage where this homesick guy in a foreign country was just obsessed with the sport. And I had colleagues and college mates saying, यार तू तो पूरा दिन वो BBC खोलता है, तू county scores check करता है, you're on Cricinfo, you write match reports for our college matches. Why are you doing like law and stuff? Just go back and join Cricinfo. I'd be like, come on, man. Why would they ever take me? But one fine day in the dead of the winter of 2005, Jan 2005, I sent out an application. Back then, Cricinfo was Wisdom Cricinfo. They were hiring in the Hammersmith London office. They were hiring in Chennai and they were hiring in Mumbai or Bombay as we know it back then. I just sent it off. Not sure if I'd ever get a reply. I did get a reply. Things got fast-tracked and October 10th, 2005, I got into this line. And uske baad to, you know, I mean, you can't really plan things. It's about opportunity. It's about hard work. It's about luck. It's about fortune. But very, very glad that 19 years after I got into this line, I'm here. I'm talking cricket. I get to meet people like you. You guys call me on your show. So in a nutshell, that's my cricketing journey. Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting. You mentioned your dad saying that, you know, he took you to watch a game because it was Viv Richards playing. And I have a similar experience where I remember where I was 6 or 7, where I didn't go to the ground, but because there was one of these games in the 90s where Tendulkar was batting like Tendulkar, and it was late night, and my father told my mom that, you know, he has to watch this. It doesn't matter if he's late tomorrow, but he has to watch this because it can't get any better. And the kind of impact, you know, when a father figure or your father itself tells you that, look, here's a great player, you must watch. It's not just about the game. I would say it's a lot about life as well. Like,
absolutely, because this is coming, Nishad, like you mentioned, my father, your father, whoever it is, and I'm sure your viewers will have fathers and uncles and big brothers, neighborhood ka chacha, jo bhi hai. These figures, because we're young, we're impressionable, we hang on the words of what these seniors say, and we believe, we expect कि ये जो कहेंगे हमसे, it's also coming from a place of knowledge, from a place of passion, and it might be cricket, it might be kabaddi, it might be tennis, but we try to imbibe something from what our fathers and our father figures say, especially as the case of you and me, we're both 6.5. So, and it left a mark for you, and it left a mark for me. Yes, different situations, different decades even, but the impact was the same, right?
oh, absolutely. And that brings me to my next question, where your father covered the 87 World Cup, but the thing that he's remembered for in cricket a lot of the times is because of his interview of Sachin, the first ever video interview, which happened at one of the Mumbai Maidans, where a 15-year-old Tendulkar had come to watch Dilip Vengsarkar bat during one of the Time Shield games, I think. And I think your father was around there and they decided to record the interview. the answers were, of course, in monosyllables because the shy Tendulkar wasn't able to quite converse. But we could see your father making the effort as an interviewer to make this young man a lot more comfortable. What sort of an impact did that interview have on your career? Like just maybe learning the art one to just taking the footsteps in the profession.
Yeah, again, good question. I'll be very honest. Looking back, probably more so in the last 5 years since I've gravitated towards video, I've actually gone back and tried and picked up things. Unfortunately, as nostalgic and as epic as that interview is, it's, as you know, and your viewers will know, it's only a few clips. The
Yeah.
full interview is somewhere. It's with Mr. Khalid Ansari and his team in the midday office. So if I've seen it once, very, very grainy VHS copy. If that was out, probably, Nishad, I would have been able to give you a more widespread answer in the art of learning things. But because my memory of it is now just these few clips, but again, like I didn't try, as you briefly got to earlier, like I didn't try to follow my father. I also didn't try to base anything I did on just that one interview. At least before that. Now, as I said, in the YouTube years, I do go back and see how can he answer it so straightforwardly? How can he pose the question? How is this man from a different world who's nearing 40 speak to a teenager? So I pick up these things. But more than watching the clip, just the kind of memory, that I can say, with pride. Yes, my father did 300 movies. He got the Padma Shri. People remember him for n number of roles. Just yesterday, someone messaged me saying Shaktiman ke Mahaguru. All that is fantastic, and I really, it's a cliche, but I swell with pride. But that's such an interview, because cricket is something else, right? I'm a cricket nut. You're a cricket nut. There are crores of us. The amount of people every time it's Sachin's birthday, every time it's my father's birthday, WhatsApp, Instagram, social media, the times that clip, what is it, a 2.5 minute clip at max, Nishant? When that comes to me, I can't say what that means to me. So more than the impact of watching my father interviewing a kid at the time who would go on to become my sporting hero, it's just the legacy and the memory of that, because it is the first time Sachin was ever interviewed. And I don't know if you know the backstory, but very briefly, Ayaz Memon and my father were doing some sports shows. They had gone to Mr. Sunil Gavaskar's office. He was with the PMG group back then. And they asked him in the course of the interview, they said, who's the best batsman in India? And Mr. Gavaskar said, I can quote this because I've heard this from my father and Mr. Gavaskar and Ayaz. He said, right now, Dilip Vengsarkar is the best batsman in India. The second best is a boy called Sachin Tendulkar. So actually, It was Sunil Gavaskar sir's prompting that got Ayaz and my father, then through Mr. Khalid Ansari and the midday group to go and shoot that. So, but just what that interview has done for a generation of cricket fans to remember my father and then me in some small way linked to it, that is my biggest takeaway from that. Yeah.
And now when you started your own journey, and it was to begin with, you were writing. Like I remember, the first time that we didn't work directly, but we wrote for the same website called Cricket Country when it had just launched. And obviously, we were just names for each other at the time. We only met during the 2015 World Cup. You were still writing for CricBuzz, and cricket media or media as such has come a long way since. But during those travels, like, say, for example, during the 2015 World Cup, you were in New Zealand, I was in Australia following the Indian team, but you were doing a lot of these different games. I'm sure because covering an India game, it's a circus because the whole world is around there. But you covered a lot of the non-India games, and there's a lot of scope to cover stories. How did you enjoy that? And which were some of the stories maybe that you remember?
You're a good journalist. You've done your research, Nishad. And this is not just because we overlapped. Great question. And I'll tell you, and I've said this before also, you were part of that contingent. There were, I don't know the number, but there were a lot. I think there were 52 Bangladeshi journalists, were the second highest volume of traveling journalists. We Indians would have probably been, I don't know, 80, 90. I'm just going to guess. So, karte hain. There were 5 of us that chose New Zealand as the base. Why? Just what you alluded to, right? That the jing bang, the pressure, the dol nagara pitna that comes with covering India at a World Cup, us 5, we didn't want that. We knew India would come to play Ireland, India would come to play New Zealand. One was Eden Park, one was Seddon Park, if I'm not mistaken. It was a Napier. Jo bhi tha.
Hamilton.
Hamilton. So and that's when we met. So we knew that Jingman ko ana hi hai, and you know what I'm talking about. If it's your first
Yeah.
World Cup, I get it, but it was not my first World Cup. Maine kaha, yaar, I just don't. It's nothing against our fellow media guys, but you know what I'm saying. It's just the pressure to follow what is Dhoni doing. What's we said. We don't want that. Now, having said that, it's not so straightforward. I, of those five, was the most privileged one in that I was at the time editing a cricket website, as you mentioned, CricBuzz. So I had the luxury of saying कि मैं यहाँ पे जाऊंगा. The other four guys had to actually convince their bosses, तुम लोग न्यूजीलैंड में क्या करोगे? लेकिन like you just said, Nishad, it's the opportunity to get stories away from the shadow of having to track every movement of Dhoni, Rohit, Kohli, right? That allowed us to go and do. And every now and then I do go back and I actually I do feel proud of the kind of stories I was allowed. There was no other World Cup in my decent World Cup cricket coverage history like those stories. Why? Because we were free. Anand Vasu and I could get on a bus and go like 40 minutes outside of Christchurch and see a club, the Albion Cricket Club, where the McCullum brothers came from, right? I'm not saying you can't do that if you're tracking India, but you know what I'm saying? The chances are less, right? The editor will call, your senior will call, can you file the copy? Where's the PC copy? No, actually, I'm just going 40 minutes outside of Christchurch to the Albion. He'll say, why are you I'm not making a general statement, but the chances of doing that are much less. And we covered a lot of fun games as well. So for me, I can't believe, Nishad, it's been over 9 years since that World Cup, and I remember it like it was like a couple of weeks ago because of that freedom. And of course, when all of you fellow Indian journalists and the Indian team came, we had to keep doing it. But the freedom, I hope I'm making sense. The freedom to just go and explore these small stories without the baggage of covering the Indian team, I love that. I had a similar chance in 19 when I was back at Cricket Country in a very different role to also do that. I did a couple. I think I did 4 India matches. But even in that stretch, as great as it was to be in the UK doing it, I did miss the chance to to go down to an Albion CC. I tried to do that, but it was much tougher to convince my boss then when India's playing. I didn't do India Pakistan. In fact, the first India Pakistan World Cup match I ever covered was last month in New York because I said, you know what, let's go see how it is. I had a blast. But I'll stand by my decision in 3-4 past World Cups to stay away from big India games, especially India Pakistan. Oh, I don't want that pressure. You know what I mean, no?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I remember my World Cup debut was actually India Pakistan, and 2015
15, no?
World Cup. Yeah, that was my first ever game at a big World Cup.
Oh,
I'd done the T20 World Cup, but because my trip got confirmed late and the visa came in late, I missed the India Pakistan game that year in Bangladesh. But the next year, India Pakistan, it was literally like having to latch on to every word, like every word that is said. Like I remember from my perspective that Ahmad Shehzad walked out with a cask on his hand. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And there's that pressure, right? So luckily Moin Khan was sitting next to me. So I by then I'd gotten to know him a little bit. So I asked him, what's happened there? He's like, no, while batting in the nets, he got hit a bit. He's fine, but we are just taking precautions. So quickly, within 10 minutes, a copy has been filed and it's been sent back to India because, websites at the time really needed
correct.
it. So this is just to illustrate for the viewers the kind of pressure that there is. But 2015, I remember, I think you've gone and met people like Matthew Sinclair, Chris Harris, and some of the others, if I'm not wrong.
Yes. Matthew Sinclair, Chris Harris. I tracked down Daniel Vittori's father about 35 minutes outside of Hamilton, where we met. He worked in a factory. I went to the factory. I sat in his office. I just wanted to get to know, from a country which is it's not known for producing spinners. How is this guy now in his 18th year of cricket? I spoke to, again, the names are all skipping me. Player, he wasn't a big player. He played in the 70s and 80s. He was the mayor of Wellington. I'm forgetting his name. There was a guy called Peter Parker. He was the guy in that iconic picture of Dunedin Test match when Michael Holding kicks the stumps. He was the guy at the non-striker end. I tracked down him, and I tracked down a couple others. Again, it was just that, as you just briefly also hinted, again, this is for the benefit of your viewers, the digital era has changed. 9 years ago, just being 9 years ago, Nishad, it was very, very different. Now, if I were to put myself in a World Cup like next week in Dunedin, I probably wouldn't get the chance to go and do those stories. So it's also reflective, as you mentioned, how quickly and how far the digital space has gone. But yeah, all these names that you mentioned, and I remember Chris Harris. Chris Harris, funny, I mentioned there were 5 of us Indian journalists, right? Chris Harris, maybe because he'd been around Indian media and I think he was part of the ICL, so he was a little street smart. Individually, me, Sriram Veera, and Amit Gupta had all reached out to him. Okay. Without letting each of us know, he called us all separately to the same place outside a hot dog. I said, Chalo, shuru ho ja. We're like, Are yaar, hum to 5 log hai. But again, it was like these kind of fun stories. And I found the Kiwis very, very chilled out, as you would have also seen from your years working with these guys. They're just chilled out. Small country. Lokhandwala has more people than New Zealand. It just says what a chilled out. So again, somehow, whenever you ask me about that 2015 World Cup, it's my best experience as a journalist.
And also, if you can sort of tell our viewers a little bit about, one of the things that I was told before going to Australia and New Zealand is that, take photos and videos of foreigners with Indian flags, of them going crazy about cricket. And you see nothing of that over there. Like literally nothing. So like I had to literally tell them, the kind of craze that we have in India for cricket, you don't find that in Australia and New Zealand. It's literally not there. Yes, on match day, maybe some of them would come, but it's not like they would turn up for practice sessions, etc., etc. Now, talking about cricketers, it's just that they live such different lives there as compared to here. Even former cricketers like, Matthew Sinclair, Chris Harris had to go on to do different things. In fact, I think Matthew Sinclair went through a very tough time. So can you just tell us about that contrast with India?
Again, it just comes down to the culture, like you alluded to. It comes down to population. Rugby is the biggest sport in New Zealand. In Australia, it's Aussie rules football. Probably cricket is second in both those countries. But even despite these countries being so close geographically, even Australia, a number 2 sport in Australia, you still get sold out crowds. And the average person knows. In New Zealand, having spent a better part of a month there, despite the World Cup going on, the 15 World Cup, and this was New Zealand's golden run to the final, first time, Brendan McCullum, all these big names, it still didn't capture the imagination. So population, culture, we Indians, we love to put our sporting icons, especially cricketing icons, on a different level. More money. I mean, I know there's a few years gap between us, but you'll understand when I say, and our viewers as well, that WorldTel, Mark Mascarenhas, Manmohan Singh opening up the economy. How quickly, Nishad, how quickly did Sachin become an icon? He was an icon, but it took Mark Mascarenhas to come in and tap into an awakening market, bringing Western sensibilities. 100 crore deal, Sachin, what is it, 94, I think it was, or something, if I'm not mistaken. All these things. This won't happen in Australia. This won't happen in New Zealand. Pat Cummins wins the World Cup and he's pushing his own trolley at the Sydney airport, right? So it's just, we're here as an Asian nation and they're here as Western nations, and so many reasons. But I love to capture, to chronicle that journey. So I tried while I was there. I did more of what you were saying, the pictures in 19, because even in those 4 years, Nishad, the 19 World Cup was a very digital World Cup,
Yes.
right? In 15, I was not taking videos. In 19, I was doing mainly videos, So that kind of thing. But the one example I always like to give is epic semi-final. New Zealand, South Africa, Eden Park. They win it. The team is on the grass, barefoot, drinking beer all night long. The next day, all of us Indian journalists who were left over had to scramble to get tickets for the final. India had been knocked out. I'd hop from New Zealand to Sydney. I'd watch the final and I'd come back to Auckland. I'm literally in the second last row of some Air New Zealand flight. The flight's delayed. मैंने कहा यार इंडिया में तो delay चलता है, यहाँ तो 10 मिनट की delay होता नहीं है. It was delayed because the New Zealand team had managed to get tickets on the same flight as we're going. But they weren't like our guys in the front. They all came to the back. But every single Kiwi on that flight, and I'm telling you, I'd been there for almost a month. I hadn't seen that passion. But because the team had now reached the final, everyone on that flight, they got up and they clapped. And I'm like, yeah, this is history being made. Because I don't think Kane Williamson, Brendan McCullum McCullum, all these guys, Guptill, who sat next to me for 2.5 hours, I don't think they'd ever been cheered on a flight, you know? So having seen that, I'm like, in India, the flight would have been stalled for 4 hours. There would have been mara-mari selfies. But yahan pe, this small nation and its citizens, they're clapping and they're beaming. You know, one old lady, she hugged Kane Williamson. So in that 10-minute interaction, I saw exactly what you're saying. Ki India mein hota, there are times we see on social media, Dhoni's got to take an Indigo flight for whatever reason. But can you imagine the Indian team under Dhoni going to the final at MCG or a Wankhede and having to hop onto a Indigo flight, and that too sitting in the back thing? वो नहीं होता ना. So it's just one glimpse into how different these two cultures are.
In fact, it's interesting. I was on a flight with the Indian team during that World Cup. It was from Melbourne to Auckland when we were coming over, and I had it was quite strange because I sat just in front of, I think it was Ambati Raidu and Ajinkya Rahane. And so what because there were limited first class seats and legroom seats. So what MS Dhoni used to do again, he used to allow some of the fast bowlers to sit there because the fast bowlers were really critical in that World Cup, and a couple of other players, I saw, and then the team was there. But what it looked like in the sense in that flight, because there were a lot of foreigners who had obviously no idea what cricket is, they seemed a lot more comfortable because they were not getting the attention. Like, I remember MS Dhoni, it was a 5-hour flight, maybe MS Dhoni taking the window seat and maybe dozing off for at least 3 to 4 hours with nobody to bother him. That doesn't happen in India.
And exactly, and I'm glad for your viewers' sake you brought up that, because it's one reason why so many of these of the cricketers in India, they do hop away to random Scandinavian countries and the West, because of course you'll meet Indians every 10 steps, but not like here, so. And so that's why so many of them drop the hat. And I don't blame them, because where can they go? They have to go somewhere where they're not mobbed. So, and I'm sure, as you said, Dhoni probably got the best nap of the World Cup on those 5 hours.
Yeah, possibly. And the our profession allows us a very important privilege, and it's a privilege, I say, because I get to learn a lot from such things, and those are interviews. I think the more you speak to people, the more perspectives you get, and
Yep.
of course, I have this passion to get knowledge, and I think it's just easier when you're talking to people. And you've obviously had your own share of big interviews. I can see a couple being put up there on your wall as well. And sometimes sports persons may not be as articulate as some of the other more educated people, but they generally do end up saying a line or two that sort of has an impact. Maybe
Yes.
their philosophy, which they've practiced, and they just say it. For them, it's just like muscle memory, I can say. So what have been some of your memorable interviews that you really hold close, and what have given you joy and have really maybe taught you also something?
Well, as you can see behind, there's very few. There's probably only 5. So that just says that of
Exactly, yeah.
all the ones I've done, I've actually liked 5, and I've chosen those 5. They're Virat Kohli twice, Rohit Sharma, Jasprit Bumrah, Rishabh Pant, and Shubman Gill the first time. You're right. There always is that one line. The one line, I mean, I don't remember all that Rohit said, but the one line that stuck to me, exactly 14 years later, it was August of 2000, July, August 2010, was when Virat Kohli had got his second chance at the Indian team, the IPL and all that stuff he hadn't done. I was at his debut match in Dambola in 2008. It didn't work out. He was called back in 9 and he got a couple of hundreds. Gautam Gambhir gave him his man of the match. So now he was seen as, now this brash kid with the attitude problem is now taking things seriously. But again, how old was he in 2010? He was 20, barely 21 probably, So again, as you know, you go into an interview with preconceived notions. He arrived as I thought he would almost. He had the attitude, all that stuff. But when he got down to talking, I'm like, kya hi bolega, He actually spoke very, very well for a person of that young age. He was not the Virat Kohli we all know and admire and cherish now. 2010, he wasn't even 1 year into his career. But the question, and you know what I'm coming from, you ask him certain questions, and then you see, Virat, you've now got 300s in the span of the, 6-7 months. There's talk of Ray Jennings has talked you up as a future India captain. You've got a good red ball career. He's like, I'm going to stop you. I'm not ready for Test cricket right now. अब वो मेरे को रोक रहा है. I'm like, he didn't have to. He could have been like, yeah, it's an honor. He said, no, I'm not ready. Just because I'm now making a buzz in 1 days, I have to go back to Delhi. I have to play a lot of Ranji matches. I have to play a lot of zonal, and I think he even used the word Duleep. I think he said zonal. I have to play more zonal cricket, more 4-day cricket. Only then can I prove to myself and the selectors that I'm ready. So right now, let's not even go there. So that one line, of course, uske aage piche, there were many cliches, but that one line, for some reason, that stuck out. And as much as he's gone on to get 50 hundreds, personally, I will remember his achievements from 14 to 15 as a test player, So maybe in that one very candid answer he gave, something like that, says what Virat Kohli knew at that age, He could have said anything. Ha, bhaiya, main ready hu. Yeah. He said, no, I'm not ready now, And the fact that he went back to talking about Delhi, Ranji, zonal, that sort of surprised me. So that's one line. I'm sure there are better lines, but mujhe yaad nahi aa rahe wo. That's the one line that really stuck out. There was one right now from Rishabh. I interviewed Rishabh Pant just after DC's campaign got done and just before the team went. And of course, you know what's happened to him, and you're treading very cautiously. You don't want to ask questions which might trigger something. Halanke, he and his manager said, you can ask what you want to ask. But in the middle of asking him all that, he just said, the first thing that I did was when I got out was like, do anjan log the. But I just said, hold me and just hold me. I have to put my leg back in place, in that trauma, to know that I have to put my leg back. And what does putting your leg back? He's like, bhaiya, mujhe nahi pata. Bas maine kiya, and I did it. So these two lines, for various different reasons, just come to mind after you asked me the question.
Yes, and you mentioned the Rishabh Pant line, and because it possibly saved his international career,
Absolutely.
in fact, his career.
Yep.
Yeah, and about Virat Kohli, I would say it just showed the clarity of thought that he had at a young age, that what, I'm not ready, and that awareness that I will get ready. And it did take him time. Like, he actually arrived in Test cricket he debuted in June 2011 in West Indies, but he arrived well and truly during that 100 in Australia in Adelaide.
Absolutely.
So it did take him those couple of years to be ready for Test cricket. But someone like, say, Virat Kohli, who's very intense even when he speaks, and every word is well thought out. And then you've got a Rohit Sharma, a guy that you and me would associate with more because he just seems to be one of our guys from Bombay, who will just come, sit with you, have a chat with you. But he wasn't always like that for the world, because initially a little bit reserved, trying to get a measure of the world. But once he got that confidence and he got that awareness of talking to the world, his personality started coming out. And that's where I think his fan following built, because people just started liking him for what he is. What have been your interactions with him? You've got that one interview of that as well. And we love his press conferences, obviously.
Absolutely. So the Rohit and Virat one were actually for the same cover story of a sports magazine I was working with. So I flew from Mumbai to Noida to interview Virat, and then in fact we interviewed Rohit literally in a Lower Parel in Phoenix Mills. I'm forgetting the name of the restaurant. You could already tell, they were earmarked for greatness, to use another cliche, but Rohit was awkward with his words. He was confident, but maybe there's a language. He didn't have the grasp of English at that time, but he was very chilled out. I still knew that I was talking to Virat Kohli, and there was that younger than me, but there was that thing with Rohit. I didn't get it, because even back then, despite not being the Rohit we all now like a lot more, are betna, are kaise ho, so all kind of thing. Aap kuch loge, that kind of thing. I'm like, no, we've called you. What do you want? Are kuch bhi, aap mere ko pani do. So these small things. But I'm so glad that he's now become this guy who most people just seem to like. Tough. I mean, if Virat Kohli had it tough, I'd say Rohit Sharma had it tougher, because the expectancy from him was a lot more and a lot early years. It took him years to get into the test team, hold it down. So what he's seen, of course, every cricketer will have his own journey, but what he's seen with the pressure and the expectation, I think I'm most happy for him that he finally got his hands on that T20 World Cup, because you could see what all he was doing. Not that Virat Kohli didn't give his best when he was captain, but it's just there's a likability factor. I don't have any sound. You know what I'm getting at? I don't have any sound reasoning to prove ऐसा क्यों होता है? But sometimes when you're more likable, bigger things come your way. So that's what I would like to remember Rohit Sharma for.
And about the T20 World Cup, you had mentioned earlier that the India-Pakistan game was the first you covered at a World Cup, this time in New York. Now, having stayed away and abstained from India-Pakistan cricket for all these
Abstain,
years,
bilkul.
yeah, abstain. I'm using that word, it's well thought out. But what made you go to New York? And for viewers, actually, Jamie is a fourth generation American. He's very much Indian. Let me tell you, he's more Indian than than most of us. But just remember, he's a fourth generation American. So was it also a calling? Look, here's where I studied, one. Here's where my ancestors came from, two. And there's my country is playing the arch rival. So let's go there. Was it that?
It sort of became that, Nishad, only after I landed and I'm telling like relatives I'm here. They're like, oh, you've come, but you said you weren't coming because your wife and son didn't get the visa. No, I'm here for cricket. Oh, you're playing. I said, no, your country is hosting. Hosting? Where? New York. And literally they were in Connecticut and then like Boston, which are like the state away, and they couldn't get it. So that thought came to me. But no, I have nothing to hide. It was supposed to be a longer trip. It was supposed to be the whole New York leg. But again, due to delays, you mentioned delays in your first World Cup. You know where I'm coming from. It came down to the end that I was actually only there for 2 matches. But I said, you know what? It's a different experience. I am used to, as you know, I'm used to going for the whole World Cup, being away for 35, 40 days. Very surreal to be going to New York for just 5 days and covering 2 matches. But work was such, I actually had to interview Chris Gale for a client. And Chris Gale, it was supposed to be done. Again, there's no big secret here. Very simple story. Unbelievable to many people. But Chris Gale and I were supposed to meet in Mumbai during the IPL. But his dates got changed. And he's like, listen, Jamie, I'm going to be in New York in these days. Can you come there? And I said, yeah, Mumbai, Lower Parel to New York, वो थोड़ा फर्क है, but as it worked out, I was flown out, and so it's a work trip, and we just made sure that we sort of tied it into the big match because Gale was going to that match as the World Cup ambassador. That's where you would have seen that he got that white coat signed by everyone. So it was actually just two birds with one stone. But I'm actually glad I did finally break that vow of abstinence. But again, had I been there for the whole World Cup and knowing that I'm going to West Indies, I would have found a way to skip that match. Very honestly, Nishant, only because I was going for 4 days and there was zero baggage, no pressure. I didn't have to file anything as soon as stumps were done. There was a team following me. I didn't have my tripod. It was a very privileged trip, let's just say that. And I'm glad the game actually turned out to be a cracker because 119 to defend that, watching Bumrah, and that was the match where India's campaign, began. So I'm glad I'm part of that small slice of India's T20 glory.
And what will be your enduring memory from that game? Because 48 of 48 with Fakhar Zaman, smashing it as he does. It looked like the game could get over for Pakistan with maybe 2-3 overs to spare with the kind of form he was in. Although Rizwan was struggling at one end, holding it together. When you were covering the game, and from your perspective, what were your thoughts? Because I remember watching it with a friend of mine who's a sports psychologist and who's worked with some of these athletes and predominantly in tennis, but he's worked with a few cricketers as well. And we both were just watching and we both said, you know what, hang on. If we could collapse, there's something that could be in store here. Let's just watch. So what was it there like?
Yeah, so I was sitting in that makeshift media box at the Nassau County as usual, right at the back. Backbenchers, for your viewers, is not like in class. Back means sabse upar, best view, everyone's in front of you, no one's peering over your laptop. I always like sitting at the back. So it was Siddharth Monga, R. Kaushik, me, and then Maulin from the BCI, and then the stats guy. I don't know his name. It was just 5. Baki sab log ko jo bol rahe the. Very honest, initially, you know what I'm talking about? You get the feeling, yaar, 119 bahut kam hai. For some reason, I didn't get that feeling. I'm not saying I was sure that India would win. I thought there were times when now it's gone, as you mentioned, because the game was in their control. But that feeling of, you know what I'm talking about? Aaj to koi chance nahi. I didn't get that feeling because I knew the pitch was very, very tough to bat on. Beyond Babar and Rizwan, Pakistan, with all due respect, have no batting. And then I knew that Bumrah was just going to do something, genius. So Was I worried? No. Was I overconfident? No, because until he bowled Bumrah and then when Akshar got that wicket, that's confirmed me that in log se nahi ho payega. But it was a strange one because Bumrah and the bowlers made 119 look like what? 140, 145? You know, as good as Rizwan was looking, was he dominant? No, you know, he got a decent ball. I think he played a bad shot, but once he got bowled, and then of the 34,000, probably 30,000 were wearing Dream 11 blue shirts. When you see that in a foreign country, you're like, "ठीक है, ab ho gaya." But it was a very very fun match because normally 119 would be a cakewalk, right? But that was how I will say that was how bad the New York pitch was. I wasn't a fan of that New York pitch. Not at a T20 World Cup level where you want more entertainment. Um, a lot of people say, yeah, we're sick of 220 scores. So am I, but I don't think that New York pitch was, at least for a World Cup, I would have wanted to see a slightly more batter-friendly wicket. That's just my views on that. As good as the bowling was there.
Like we saw those 160, 170s at a Barbados, especially the final.
Exactly. That's to my mind, that's what an ideal at a World Cup level. In bilaterals, I'm saying bilaterals, it's open range. It's a buffet. Aapko 300 chahiye, aapko 60 chahiye, that's fine. But at a World Cup, when you've sifted through all the teams to get to apparently the best, I would want to see more, as you mentioned, 160, 165. That's a good match for me.
Now, this is a question which I think you'll be able to answer really well because you've studied in the US. You've struggled in those times with Willow TV, with those old internet modem connections and trying to catch a hold of the cricket. And I've got obviously a lot of friends and family in the US who went there and have managed to keep their love for cricket intact. It was a struggle like in the early 2000s, as you mentioned. You've seen that. Plus your ancestry of being American in that sense, and you've got relatives over there. Cricket went to America this time in a big way. The all intent was there to make an impact. Now, has it left an impact? And two, what can cricket do? Now we've got Major League Cricket. From what I hear from a couple of conversations is that the standard is a lot better this year. It's grown a lot bigger. Where do you see this going? Especially since you gave us a small anecdote of your relatives who weren't quite sure about, hey, hang on, there's a World Cup going on in our country.
Exactly. And I'll be very honest with you, Nishad. My views from last month, in the month of June, when I was there, to something which I saw as a college level player in the early 2000s, 2000 to 2003, trying to organize a mat from Dallas to be flown to Ohio to Dallas. I don't know how well you are aware, but there's a gap, So getting kits, convincing the social, there was a social, whatever the name was, that American lady that, hey, I represent a bunch of South Asians and West Indians. We have a game called cricket. I'm giving you the whole backstory. Having gone through all that, then having graduated from college, having gone to Boston, having played with Caribbeans in Boston, in Rhode Island, even in New York, having seen what the game means to expats, South Asians, West Indians, Kiwis, Aussies, all that stuff, they will always want to see. I was on a podcast and I told someone, had this World Cup, Nishad, been happening in 2003 or 4, even the first part of 5, and I was still working in Boston, I couldn't afford $1,200 tickets, but I would have tried my best to drive myself to Nassau, even to just watch a practice match. Because like you mentioned earlier, we Indians don't have to be journalists. We Indians will watch anything with the Indian team, right? So it will always, I think, appeal to that kind of people. Is it boosting American cricket? I will be a naysayer and say no, right? It's not going to happen. To become, let's look at Uganda, right? Uganda and PNG, they were all people from Papua New Guinea, right? I'm not belittling other teams, but when there's 4 Pakistanis, 3 Sardars, Corey Anderson, and 2 West Indian origin people, yes, it's America because the American dream allows immigrants to come in and aspire for greater things. But is it Team USA? Many will say yes. I don't think so. Is their standard being boosting? Yes, the MLC might have gotten better marginally. Is it appealing to a wider audience? It's not going to. I have real problems with cricket even going to the Olympics. Call me pessimistic, but cricket has existed in a small bubble for 150 plus years, and it's very happy, Nishad, existing in that. Yes, you want to globalize sport, but look at this World Cup. We had 20 teams coming. 50% of them were being bowled out for under 100. कुछ फायदा हुआ उनका? Maybe I'm being too negative. I don't know. So USA, and I said this in 2010. I had left Cricinfo. I was working in Bombay. Harsha used to do one of the first podcasts for Cricinfo. He said, Jamie, can you come to Mahalakshmi Chambers? We're recording a podcast. I forgot the gentleman's name. He had been part of the Atlanta Olympics organizing committee. He was heading up USA Cricket. He's like, let's do a podcast. Nishad, मैं बिल्कुल सच कह रहा हूँ. What I said 14 years ago, I'm saying to you now. And what I said 40 years ago to that gentleman, it came true. America can be a fantastic host nation. I don't think, in my limited experience, there's any better country than America to rato rat put up stadiums. Their infrastructure is just too good.
Yeah.
Are they ever going to be a cricketing superpower? Nahi hoga. Nahi hoga. Because cricket is probably the 11th sport that an average American will take to. Why would they do? You'll get pockets, but it will always be, and I know I'm being negative, it'll always be the expat community going towards it. You might get one or two Americans, but it's so far behind. And frankly, I'm okay with it. Like I said, 34,000 people, they'll come once, they'll come twice, they might come 3 times. But if you still keep the pricing at $1,200, if you still keep the entry, yes, it's America, but Nishad, having been there, getting in was like trying to get into, Chinna Swami, So it's a one-off, but there's enough for someone with my experience, 19 years in this field and 28 years watching cricket, to know that itna aasan nahi hai. We're hearing stories of ICC board asking them, where did the money go? People are resigning. I don't want to paint a gloomy picture based on 4 matches in New York, 5 matches, but to my mind, you're not growing the game in America. You're chasing the dollar. You're trying to cash in on certain players and their fan base. Are you growing American cricket? Maybe I'm proven wrong, Nishad, but I don't think so.
Yes, hopefully it does, because America, as we know, it's the land of enterprise, marketing, and if cricket can tap into that market, nothing like it. But, I wasn't there, obviously, but it isn't difficult, I would say, to be skeptical, even for someone like me. I've never been to America, but I've got a lot of friends over there. And, because I did 12th science, so half of them ended up going there as techies. So which is why. But you could only sense that excitement from them. So, hopefully, cricket does pick up in some way. Now, just segueing a little now, you spoke about you have a bit of memorabilia behind you, and you've got one of those balls signed. Can you tell us who signed it and a little bit of a story behind it?
They've both been signed by me. They've not been signed by any
okay.
player. It's pure self praise, wallowing in self glory. It's the only two 5-wicket hauls I've taken. The first one was 5 for 15 on October 26, 2005, Brabourne Stadium. My father and a lot of his Hindi film industry colleagues, actors, technicians, directors, producers, the whole gamut, they began a club in the 80s called MCC, Match Cut Club. Nasiruddin Shah, a lot of these players, they've all played for it. In the Bombay circle, they're well known. So I having watched this team from a young age, I finally was told, "Acha, ab tum hamaare liye khel sakte ho." I was 24 years old. I had literally just come back from America. I was probably a couple weeks into my journalism career. And my dad said, our old school, Woodstock, the Woodstock team is down. And I've organized 3 matches, one at Kalina, one at Balwinder Sandhu's ground, main naam bhul raha hu unka, and one at the Brabourne through Mr. Suru Nayak. We're one short, you come and play. The opposition was terrible. I literally had to just toss the ball up and get 5 wickets. But my father at that time, he was well into his mid-50s. He ran from long on and took a diving catch one-handed at mid-on. Wow. And to this day, people remember. I'm like, Jamie, shame on you. You didn't move to mid-on, and your father in his 50s ran. So that was the first one I took. This was much more recent. I started a team here in NCR called LIT because, as you will relate to, we get into this line of work for certain passion, but in chasing that passion, we forget the feel of a ball and bat. So in 16, me and some like-minded colleagues started a team. This is my first 5 wicket haul, 5 for 24 at DAV College, Lajpat Nagar, on the 12th of May 2018. So it's pure. Just when I feel low, I said, you have 2 5 wicket hauls, khush raho bas. That's it.
And to guess the name MCC, that would have been your father's thought.
I think so. I think so. I never asked the question, but it was called. But I'm guessing, yeah, it was called Match Cut Club. I'm guessing because match cricket and cut because they were all technicians. So you say cut and then club. I never heard this, but I'm assuming that's what it was. Yeah.
But the reason I get into this is because, when you've gone abroad, say like even to an England, where we covered the World Cup, and we would have noticed a lot of our own friends, whether they were, of Indian origin or not, and those who loved cricket would play cricket on the weekends, serious cricket on the weekends. We've got a bit of that here in Mumbai, but, it can sort of grow, and it's not so that you say are aspiring to go on to a higher level. After all this, there could be a couple of Praveen Tambes. Yes, that's possible. But just to keep fit and to rekindle your love for the game from childhood, I would really encourage our viewers to continue to play the sport. What do you think?
Absolutely. Everyone watching and listening, wherever you are, please just do that. I understand the limitations of a city like Mumbai. There's a challenge, and I'm very blessed to be in NCR, where literally wherever I look, there's grounds and grounds and grounds. Wherever you are, just try, because as I mentioned a few minutes ago to Nishad, guys, please, take this very seriously. It doesn't take a lot, man. You could find space, tennis ball, TT ball, just do something to rekindle your love. I don't know about getting fit. I haven't lost much weight since playing cricket, but again, I'm 43 also now. But just that passion, as I said, 19 years covering cricket, doing multiple World Cups. One fine day, I asked my colleague, when did we last hold a bat? I'm not talking about in the hall, in the corridor, in office. When did we last play a leather ball match? And we couldn't recall. So that's why me and two other colleagues, one is Vineet, who also worked with, we just started this club, and we struggled. We lost 7 of 8 matches in our first season, but by the second season, we're winning. So, and now 7 years later, you see all these trophies, bowler awards, inconsequential, as my wife will say, but for us, it's a big deal to be rewarded for doing something, So fitness, passion, time pass, whatever it is, just go out and find a way to play, not just cricket, play any sport. The older you get, especially post 35, you realize you just need to be doing something. If you're a gym rat and all, hats off to you. I'm not one of those guys. This is probably as far as I can go, but yeah, like Nishad, I plan my Saturdays from the Sunday before, okay, ground book karna hai, doston ko bolna hai, bibi se bolna hai कि मैं नहीं आ रहा हूँ. So it's insane, but it's totally worth it, guys, whoever's watching.
And finally, to finish up, I'd like you to tell our viewers about your work at the moment, because I've been on a couple of your shows. You do a lot of those live shows. You have a YouTube channel. Plus, you are there across the board. Where all can they catch a glimpse of your work?
Yes, so I do a cricket channel, very, very small cricket channel called Cricket with Jamie. I do at least one live a day, sometimes two. It's just me talking cricket, the kind of discussion I'm having with you, Nishad. But it's me and the fans. I don't think, I've done some homework. I don't think there's any cricket YouTube channel which takes tries to take every single question. So I tried to find a niche in that. Of course, there's a whole white guy talking Hindi. वो तो जब तक मैं जिंदा हूं वो रहेगा एक charm. But I said, वो सब ठीक है. At some point, they'll be like, okay, we get it. What next? So you can catch me on Cricket with Jamie. I do shows throughout the week for the Cricket Next YouTube channel. Sometimes I'm on TV9. I used to do a podcast for Glance where you came. वो नहीं है. There's my main my main channel called Jamie Ultra Indian. Right now you can catch me on Netflix. I did a movie called Maharaj, starring Junaid Khan and the magnificent Jaideep Elawat Bhai. That's streaming. I believe we're number 2 in India. So well done, all of us. Day after tomorrow, I'm off for 27 days to shoot another film. So I've got 3 web series coming out, very, very small roles. But like I said, man, before we started this, I'm just very, very blessed and fortunate to be doing so many things, which, hand on heart, Nishad, I would not thought possible 5 years ago. because you're doing a certain thing, you're loving it, you're getting paid good money, you're traveling, but that's not it. You know, I wanted to do something different. I didn't know कि 5 साल पहले मैं ऐसे चीज मैं कर रहा हूँगा, but you know, it's just YouTube and being an analyst, still covering World Cups, got to go to New York, doing some web series, doing some podcasts. Someone's watching over me and has been very kind to me, and I'm glad that I'm in a very, very artistic and very creative and happy space right now.
You know, Jamie, that has been a fantastic journey actually, and it's something that really inspires, you know, someone like me to, you know, just maybe try and discover something different. Yes, we love our sport, we know we want to do this, but you can do other things as well. And I've watched a couple of your performances on screen, and it did fill me with a lot of joy, I would say, because, you know, just seeing your friend up there, you know, just trying something different and taking those steps alongside, you know, all the great work you're doing in cricket anyways. You know, it was really amazing to see, I must say that.
Thank you. And you also did message me, so I know it comes from the heart as far as you're concerned. So thank you. Again, like I said, I didn't plan this. If I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, I would have done it at the age of 21. I would have taken better care of myself. I would have looked different, but I'm not a planner. I just follow what the heart says. The heart told me at the age of 24, become a cricket journalist. And somewhere in the middle, it said, try something else. And so I did this. So, yep, very, 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 very grateful that people have given me so many chances. I'm talking about my first editors, all my editors, colleagues, casting people in the last 5 years, writers, directors who figured that this non-actor, this piece of wood who covers cricket can be tried in some role. So very, very blessed, Nishad, very blessed.
And thank you so much once again for joining us. And at Stumps and Stories, we love to bring these stories, be it individual or whatever we've seen during our journey. So to our viewers, please do subscribe to Stumps and Stories on various audio platforms. We are on Spotify, on YouTube. You can also catch us on Digital 2 Sports. You can follow me on Nishad Paivaidya on Instagram. And yes, do catch a glimpse of Jamie and all his work on all the platforms that he's mentioned, and follow him on social media as well.